kicked off and start off with basically the quick system overview of my system, what I have, and the ideal use case in my mind at this point. Maybe not ideal use case, but the use case that I am using and that I represent for that. I may take some time and draw this out on the whiteboard so that we have that to reference back to later on, but we'll see if that's necessary. So basically in my system, I have, if you're not aware of this, I have a RV, and in my RV, I have a split-phased breaker box, which basically means I have two legs of 120 volts, 240 volts, but it runs in two separate legs. There is no 240 volt devices on the system, but it does run two legs from a 240 volt system, giving me two 50 amp breakers to run, which is 100 amps of 120 volts, which is quite a bit of power for an RV. The inverter that I chose was the 6000 XP. There is a video for the 6000 XP out there, and you can go and take a look at that. There is a complete series of videos, and in the replay, I'll see if I can link up in the corner, one of these corners around here, I'll link it up and see if I can send you to the playlist. And as a matter of fact, I'll add it to the playlist also, the playlist for the RV system. And I'm just going to write that down so later on when I get home, I don't say, what was that I promised I was going to add to the playlist? But that is definitely in my history, and if you go look at my playlist, you can find that. So that 6000 XP is fed by 31 kilowatt hours of battery storage. I have three EG4 LifePower 4 batteries, and I've got one DIY battery that is another 304 amp hours. So total it's 604 amp hours of 48 volt system with a 6000 XP inverter. And the 6000 XP is basically 220 volt legs supplying 300 watts per leg. So it doesn't supply the whole 50 amps that it would get if I plugged it into the pedestal, but I took all of the air conditioning units off of the RV, the battery, not the battery sucking, well, they would have been battery sucking. I took all of the energy hungry systems off of the RV, and I installed good, clean mini splits in there. So I have two mini splits, one in the master bedroom and one in the master cabin of the RV. Now this is a fifth wheel, so I have a main cabin with a kitchen and a living room, a bunkhouse in the middle, and another air conditioner in the master bedroom. So that was basically kind of the system. In this system, I also have a backup charging system from Victron. And this Victron system is a 48 volt charger. It's the Victron Smart Charger 150/35, which means 150 volts, 35 amps. It normally gets power when I'm traveling from portable panels or solar panels that I bring with me. And sometimes I don't need to bring them with me, but when I do need them. When I'm at home, I use the solar shed as the feed for those panels, or I did up until recently when I started switching the solar shed around to where it has its own set of batteries and everything. But when I'm traveling, that would be where that energy is fed from. So that said, this is basically the system that I'm doing. Now for me, I have the RV, and so I like having some of the home automation things where I can turn lights on and turn lights off, and that's really why I was interested in the home assistant type stuff. The solar assistant was basically where I started getting into automation for the solar for my solar system, and that's what combined the two. And we'll go through in detail pieces of those two as we break this down. But we're going to start off with the Solar Assistant basics and how the Solar Assistant is kind of connected to the system and what you need to do it. So what Solar Assistant does, and let me kind of give you a real-time view of what Solar Assistant does. Let me see if I can get my screen here set up so we can, let's see, there we go. All right, so this is the Solar Assistant, and if you're interested in a link to Solar Assistant, I'm going to put the QR code on the screen here for a few minutes, and then I'm going to take it off so that you can actually see what I'm doing. But in this QR code, you'll find links to everything during this program, but specifically you will find a link to Solar Assistant. They have a variety of different variations of it that come with hardware, or just order the software and you can put it on your own thing. I run it on a Raspberry Pi 3, I think it's called Orange, Raspberry Pi Orange, or is it not Raspberry Pi, it's Orange Pi. But I ordered it directly from them, and it was about $250, but I think the software is only about $50, so it's really not that super expensive. What the Solar Assistant allows you to do is pull from real-time pull figures and statistics and stuff directly out of your inverter. It connects to your inverter like it was any other system. So if you go to Solar Assistant, I'm just going to go to their website here and look at what they have available. They have multiple devices here that you can download, that you can buy, the software only, as we just talked about, and multiple parts here. But the compatibility list is what we're really looking for. And let's just see if I can find a Solar Assistant inverter compatibility. There it is down there. And let's just take this. That's the perfect page, I think. So as you can see here, there are a few that are not supported if you're looking at their list here. But there is a tremendous amount of inverters that are supported, and they have a wide variety of different brands and different things, as you can see down here on the list. And they've got a wide range of batteries also. I run my batteries through my Solar Assistant, don't even run them into my inverter in closed loop. So you can see here from EG4 to Daily BMS to CAN bus to JK BMS. There's all kinds of BMSs and batteries that are supported, but there's also the EG4, the Dre, the Insun, the Growatt, the Lux Power, the Mus, the Power Mister, the Sun, the SoArc, the SRNE. This is just a huge amount of them. Now, with Solar Assistant, you get a CAN set of reports once it's connected. And it's very easy to connect. You set the system up, you go into the configuration, you come over here to the model that you want to connect to. And I'm going to disconnect mine so that you can see us connected. And you come in here and you pick the model that you want. In my case, it's a Lux Power because the 6000 XP is made by Lux Power. You pick which connection it is. If you have multiple inverters out there, you'll see all of them listed here. You pick the one that it is, and then if in my case, I have batteries connected also. So I'm able to pick which brand of batteries and what kind of connection we have to them. These are EG4 batteries, so they run the Nevada protocol. And so I collect that, and then you hit connect, and basically this goes in, connects directly to the inverter, as you can see here, scans the batteries, detects how many of them there are, and then all the statistics basically become available in the system. Now, the ups and the downside to Solar Assistant, and if this is what all you need is these reports here in their native form and unedited and unchanged. Unfortunately, Solar Assistant isn't super configurable. It is a what you see, what you get, very, very simple. What we just did is basically the extent of configuring them than when you first set things up. When you first set things up, you do have to go in and configure the Wi-Fi and that stuff. But you saw that listed here also in this configuration. It's listed right here. You go in, I've got both an Ethernet connection and a broadband connection set up for this to allow for a backup if one is to go down. And I see it sometimes happening. If my Ethernet port goes out or my router goes out, then automatically it switches over to Wi-Fi and connects that way. But you can do that. And so that's what I've done here. And once you configure those two items, all the reports, all the history and everything is pre-configured with Solar Assistant. And it basically goes through and takes care of everything that you see here. All the reports from what inverter is connected, what mode it's in, what is the PV power, what are the batteries connections here, and anything that it can derive from your inverter also will come through. So if I had the batteries connected to the inverter directly, they would come through here also. Now the only reason I don't do it that way is because I also have a DIY battery. And I'll show you later when we get into Home Assistant how I take the information from both of those systems and bring them together in a single location. And the tricky part there is the behind the scenes, how they connect. And that's what I really want to show you. I want to show you how they work up front, and then we'll get to a little bit more detailed information about how they connect after you understand that. So from here, you can see that the grid is connected. You can see that the batteries, what is the charge of the batteries that I have. And if you've got the batteries, either the newer batteries or you have them directly connected, you can see stats on each one of them. And then after that, you've got the total load is 1.5 kilowatts right now. And then the solar power coming in is 1.86. So I'm actually generating a little excess battery power, and that is being sent over to the battery. And you can see the batteries are at 71%. It gives you battery history. Like here, it talks about battery power, and you can see once the sun came up where it was actually charging. And then down here, you can see the state of charge of my batteries as it goes down overnight. And then in the morning, it starts coming back up, and then it comes back down in the night, and it goes up and down. Now, there are some additional charts over here that you can get to, but keep in mind that all of these charts are stock charts. And I say stock like it's an automobile, but they all come with it. They're all canned reports right out of the box. You don't have to configure anything. You don't have to set anything up. You basically point to your internet, point to your inverter, and tell it to go. And in this case, in my case, the Wi-Fi connection was just point to my inverter on the Wi-Fi connection because I'd already configured my Wi-Fi, my internet there, and voila, it was done. It was pretty simple and easy. It does keep a totals page, so the charts, I'm sorry, let me go through the charts real quick for you. It's basically an overview of the different loads versus PV power, and you can see during the day we have much more PV power than we have loads. And you can see here I did have the grid click on for an hour or two earlier today and subsidize the incoming power so that the batteries could be charged by the PV power. And the reason I do it that way is that in order to take PV power and put it into the batteries, it's DC going to DC, it's very efficient. In order to take grid power and feed all of my systems in my RV, it's very efficient. But if I take the PV power and convert that to AC power, then I have to pay the tax on the loss of converting that power back and forth. And then later on the evening, when I need to do a charge, I have to take the AC power, convert that to DC power, and put it in the battery, and there's a tax and a loss there too. So what I like to do, instead of paying that tax and doing it that way, is I just tell I go in here through Solar Assistant, and I go over here and I say, okay, well, from this time to this time, I want you to run off the grid first. And it allows the system to do what it did here, where it just runs everything I have off of the grid, and then all the PV power goes directly into the batteries, and I don't have to pay a tax on either one of it. I don't have to pay a tax to get it out of the battery, convert it to AC, and I don't have to pay a tax later to take the AC and charge the batteries. And you can see here what a dramatic difference it made in charging during that time. And you can see here in the state of charge, the dramatic increase in charging there. During this time of the year, I've learned that I'm probably about 8 to 10 kilowatt hours of power a day, or 8 to 10 kilowatt hours of energy a day short of having enough to supply my system completely off grid. But you can't really see that from the reports here, other than coming over to some of the summary reports under total under Solar Assistant. And you can see here, I have a load of about 20 kilowatt hours, and I have solar of about 18.5. The battery was charged 6.31, and I discharged 4.4. I had about 4.6 kilowatts of grid use. And you can see that yesterday I had absolutely no grid use. I had good sun. It was relatively cool, and I didn't need to have any. But lately, about this time of the day, I've been using between 5 and 10 kilowatts a day on average. And you can see that that's between 5 and actually, so that's battery charged. I'm sorry, grid use is over here. I try to stay under 10 kilowatt hours a day, and that leaves me with well under the minimum usage that I get from the electric company. I end up with no electric bill there. I don't particularly like it having any power, but I am in Florida, and at this point here in Florida, the temperature is hot all day, it's hot all night, and the sun is beating down directly on everything all day long, so there is no hiding from it. And I'm in an RV. We're not talking about the best insulation of a house or something like that where you get a little bit more efficiency. Now, I did get rid of those air conditioners that came with the RV and put mini splits in. That helps tremendously. As you can see here, the load is between 20 and looks like 27 is the highest here during September. But this was in the 55s and 60s before I replaced those air conditioners. So it made a huge impact on making sure that that worked the way it's supposed to. Okay, so the report's here, and then it has a 12-month variation month by month, and it shows you that on a chart. And then if you go over to the power window, this gives you a little bit of configuration where you can set up a grid charge schedule or a grid first schedule, which was what I was talking about earlier. There's also some automation here, and I've played a little bit with the automation here. It's very simplistic, but it does effectively work. And then the configuration screen. That's it for Solar Assistant. If you're looking for something simple to get nice looking statistics, and they've got a dark screen mode now, they only recently added, but if you're looking for something that gives you nice little statistics that work great on your phone, that work great on your on a computer or whatnot, they've also got a service that you'll see here up at the top where you can configure this to work through their website, which means you can access it anywhere in the world. Does that mean that you can't directly go to an IP address and log into it with a firewall in your gate? Yes, you can. I tested that. It does work. You have to understand how to configure the firewall, how to get it through the gate. When your IP changes, it no longer works, and that kind of stuff. If you do it this way, it spoofs all that for you, and everything just always works as like we're logged in here. They basically give you a domain off of theirs like they did me, and you can log in from anywhere, and it stays connected to it and keeps up with all of that stuff and make sure that you don't have any of those problems. It seems to be a bit more secure that way. So that's Solar Assistant. And so going on from Solar Assistant, let's take a look at Home Assistant. And I am going to switch over to this screen while I do that and put this QR code up on the screen. If you're interested in the links for any of this, it'll be in there. And I'm going to find the Home Assistant page. Sorry, I'm used to doing the Home Assistant from home, and I use the direct link, the local link. So when I go into a browser here and I type in Home Assistant, you can see it pulls up the local link for my local network, and then I have to figure out again how to connect to it from remote. There is an app on your phone that you can use. All of this is available, again, just like Solar Assistant. You can get to it from anywhere. They have a service, I think it's about $40 a year, that not only does it donate to the company, to the open source world that builds Home Assistant, but it also allows you to have remote access from anywhere in the world that you have internet access, which is kind of nice. Now, that does mean that if you're on an RV like I do, you have to have internet access for that to work. If you're going from park to park and using park internet access, then that will work some of the times. I have a Starlink, so I don't have that problem. I'm constantly connected, so it's not really been an issue for me, but I do want to mention it just in case it's something that you're interested in. Okay, so Home Assistant is basically a home automation tool that allows you full ability to configure and to control items within your house. It just so happens that it also allows you to link in all of the solar information together. So I'm able to go out and say, hey, look, I have Solar Assistant, or I have this inverter, or I have that inverter. I want you to connect to it and pull all this information in. And then the only downside to Home Assistant is that it requires you to configure and build your screens. So all of the screens that you see here are, and I have 4 or 5 or 6 of them, but those are my transitions through time of different things that I've needed. So at one point, I needed to know what was going on with my batteries, so I built this battery screen here. And it basically says, this is the total amperage coming in PV, this is the total amperage that's being used right now, this is what's being put into the battery, here's the consumption rate versus what's actually stored. So I'm consuming 78% of all of the energy that I'm producing right now, but that means that the remaining 22% is going into the battery. You can see here that I've got the 4 batteries that we spoke of earlier, and what amperage is going into each of those batteries and thus being charged. It also gives me things like the battery voltage and the battery state of charge. And then, but the key here is with Home Assistant is it's not limited to just what we saw over in Solar Assistant. I've got the data from Solar Assistant coming in from one platform. I've got all of my home automation devices. So for example, if I wanted to turn off the air conditioning in my living room, as you can see here, I can adjust the temperature of my air conditioning. I can shut my air conditioner off. I can also go in, and you'll see out there I have some switches on the right-hand side, because I've got some fans in my bay, which is where my solar system is mounted, so I can turn those on and turn those off based on the temperature in the bay. And you can see the devices that I've got up at the top across the living room or the bedroom. And if I go over to the original screen we were on, you'll notice there's a couple of different temperature gauges here, which tell me what the temperature in the bay is, what the temperature in the living room is, what the temperature in the bedroom is, which will allow me to do things like if I'm out of town and the RV gets over, let's say, 90 degrees, I don't want to cause damage to the wood or the humidity or anything. It can automatically turn on an air conditioner for me and cool it off or drop the humidity based on how charged are my batteries and do I have enough batteries to do that. And if I have excess battery energy, I can have it leave it on more or less. In this case, the ones that we're looking at here, the bay power, the bay fans is controlled by basically by a configuration that I set up that says if the bay goes over a certain temperature, or if I have grid power coming in, or other various things, the inverter says that its temperature is of a certain way too hot or something along those lines. If I see any of those signs of things that could cause equipment trouble, then it turns on the fan, which basically pulls in cool air from underneath the RV and blows it out the vent at the very top, and it's forced through with some air to bring fresh air in there. It also allows me, which I didn't learn was really important until this year, but it also allows me to control things like humidity. When I see the humidity going up in the dawn of a spring or fall, it allowed me to stop those vents and let the heat from the inverter burn off some of that humidity, because high humidity in the high 90 percentiles can cause equipment problems for computers and inverters and stuff like that. So it allowed me to say, hey, look, the humidity is getting up into 90%, but if I let the heat from the generated from the inverter burn that heat, that moisture out, then I can bring that down before it gets to a critical level, and it has to shut the system down. So Home Assistant has, and you can see there's another screen here, but it has a tremendous amount of configuration screens and inputs. Now, let me go into and show you, there's tons of status screens here that I can walk you through. I mean, here I've got one that just talks about all the different PV, the strings I have, and how much wattage is coming in from each of those strings. And then I've got another one here, which is a power flow, which shows what's coming in from solar and total today that's coming in. Keeping in mind, this is what's coming in from the Solar Assistant and what's coming in from the Solar Shed from the Victron side of things. And then I have another one here, which on this report that shows all the total usage of the RV in AC usage, and then a second one that's all the DC usage. In other words, in an RV, you have 12-volt lights, you have all kinds of different water pumps and things that all run off of your 12 volts. Some people have refrigerators and all that run off of 12 volt. So this would actually be where that power consumption comes from. And then it has total wattage being used currently, and then it allows me to break down certain devices. So if I go into, let's say for example, if I go over here to the master status screen, I've got a power usage screen. So at one point I was tracking all the different devices in my RV and making sure that I understand which ones were using what power. In a house, this would be very useful to track how much your pool pump is using, how much your attic fan is using, how much your hot water heater is using, and things like that. You would want to know all these items. I have a hot water heater one here, and you can see that the hot water heater in my RV is used 2.4 kilowatt hours of energy today. Now, if I was traveling and not using that hot water, then I would turn that off and that energy I wouldn't want to have that on. So I could build in switches for all of that, as we saw over here in this screen here, where I have lights and bedroom plugs that turns fans on, and I've got a lot of lights out in my shed and bench lights and stuff, so that if I forget them are on, I've got an automation that just runs at a certain time of night and shuts all the lights off for me, so I don't even have to worry about it, whether I do it or not. So there are tons of different screens here, but the significant difference between what you see here with Home Assistant and what you see here with the Solar Assistant is Solar Assistant is a pre-configured, pre-packaged product that allows very little flexibility of building onto what you have. What you see is pretty much what you get. If you go out and look through it on the internet, you'll see almost this identical screen for everyone out there, and it's pretty easily identified because there is no configuration that you can do to change it other than light and dark themed screens. I'm running in dark theme now, but for years, until 2-3 weeks ago, there was no dark theme for it. They just recently came out with this. So going back to a Home Assistant, it allows you to control all that. Now, it's not limited to what I have here. I can control the hot water heater coming on or going off at certain times of day. I can control lights on the porch coming off and on. I've got a set of lights in the living room that 15 minutes before sunset, they automatically come on, so that when I'm sitting there at night and I'm reading or something, I don't have to remember, go get on, I don't have to wait until it gets so dark that I can't see. They just come on for me. They also, if I fail to turn them off when I go to bed, at midnight, they just shuts off all the lights that it knows I don't need. That's all programmable by me through a set of rules that you set up with Solar Assistant or with Home Assistant. So here you've got automations and stuff, and you can say things like, I can get a griddage out alert where it basically says when the Lux Power grid voltage drops below 210 volts, then I want you to send a notification. And if I look at the notification, it's basically sending it to my phone saying that there's a grid outage. So even when I'm out of town or when I'm not around, I can see when I have outages. Now, I can also build triggers to do things. I can tell it to go shut off the hot water heater. I can tell it to, if I've got no grid, I may want to do some things that I normally wouldn't want to do if I had grid power as a backup. Now, in my case, I like to operate 24/7 off grid, and there's some statistics here that you can see on that, and I'm glad to share them with you. This shows you one day, but if I go in here and say, show me this month, you can see this month I'm 71% self-sufficient. So I use the grid quite frequently during this month. Now, if we go back to August, you'll see here I was 76% also in that month. In July, I was 79%. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Time of year makes a huge difference because of heat where I am. But you go back another month, I was 91% efficient. You go back to May, and I didn't even have the grid hooked up. I didn't have the grid hooked up in the month before that in April, and I didn't have the grid hooked up And the month before that, actually, I did have it here, but it's so little that it's showing 0. It was 2.9 kilowatt hours way down here. And that was actually a software upgrade where I didn't realize that when I told the 6000 XP to do the upgrade, that it was going to switch into bypass mode. And it switched into bypass mode and used the grid for a few minutes while it did the upgrade. Now, I get into the early part of the year, and you'll see here in February, I used it a little bit. And then in January, I used it considerably right here around January 1st, or January 21st. Now, the significant part of this in January 21st is that is when I installed the DIY battery. So you can see before I had the DIY battery in December, I was 85% efficient. And before that, I was 74% efficient. Now, unfortunately, this little glitch here is when you reset a device. When you reset a device, the totals that come along with it get reset, and it kind of throws a little skew in your statistics. In October, I had a little bit of that too. And then in September last year is when I installed this system and got it hooked up to Home Assistant. So you can see there I was at 82%. So for the most part, I run around 80% off grid completely. During the spring and fall months, when the air conditioner's not running as much, I'm completely off grid. Now, this is Home Assistant where everything has been brought together. Now, the trick here is, and the question I always get is, how are these items brought together? So there is one more piece of the puzzle here that I need to show you before I get into showing you how to do that. I'm going to put the QR code up if you're interested in the links to any of these products while I look this up. I'm going to go to the VRM from Victron, which Victron has its own software, as most manufacturers do. Most manufacturers have a piece of software, for example, the EG4 software. Wow, EG4 monitor. See if I can get logged into this real quick. Go back and let you see. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to this, and I'm going to get rid of that QR code for a few minutes. So this is the EG4 software. The problem that I have with the EG4 software and most of these softwares is that, and you can access this one on their website, you can access this one on your telephone, and your phone looks very similar to this. It's just a stripped down version. But the problem that I have with it is the data that you get with it is very simplistic. You don't have control to really automate a whole lot and configure a whole lot. So what I did, but what's important is the data from this system can be extracted through Solar Assistant, and from Solar Assistant, it can be put into Home Assistant from Solar Assistant. But the problem is I also have, if you remember, I also have Victron devices that are Victron charge controller that I run the solar shed off of, and that I run some other, my smart shunt and other things off of. So I wanted to know when my Home Assistant is running, I don't want to know what my EG4 battery's charge is. I don't want to know what my DIY battery's charge is. I want to know what the whole bank's battery charge is. So if you look at my battery review here, you'll notice that I have a Victron battery state of charge at 69.2. And you'll notice down here, I've got a Matt's RV Battery 1, the JK BMS, which is the DIY, and it's at 66.6%. And if I come down a little bit further, I've got a Lux Power state of charge, which is basically my EG4 batteries, which all three independently are listed here. And I have a state of charge for all of them. But what was important to me is I didn't want this combination of different states of charge. I wanted it all together in one place. And that was what the shunt gave me, the Victron shunt. But I want to be able to say, do I have a large imbalance? Do I have everything out of whack? And be able to control it a little bit more. That's where the Home Assistant was really good about bringing that stuff together. But I had to be able to bring the stuff from Victron into that. So that is where I got to the Venus the Venus system, and I have two of them configured now. Right now is my main gateway in the RV, and the second one is how do I do that? Oh, dashboard. Let's try it that way. And we don't want the why can't I? Oh, you can see how often I'm in here, huh? Matt's RV. Here you go. So this is the Venus system in the RV. And so it has two devices connected to it. Over here, it has the smart shunt, and over here it has the charger, which is the extra solar panels that aren't being used in the solar panel right now for the 12-volt solar shed workup that we did. But I needed to get this information into this Home Assistant, and so all of that data is brought together through a server called an MQTT. And it's basically a messaging agent. And so what it allows each of these to do is that the Solar Assistant, and if you go into the Solar Assistant and you look under configuration, you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll notice here there's an MQTT broker, which basically is a server that the Solar Assistant provides that allows you to get to all of the data in their system in message form. In other words, when the state of charge changes, it sends a message. When the wattage of the solar panels change, it sends a message. So everything has a message. So you're talking about hundreds of messages every second coming through this to allow you to monitor everything connected to Solar Assistant. At the same time, I have everything coming from a Victron device over here in the Venus system that does exactly the same thing. It allows you to send all of this data to an MQTT server. Now, the problem is that both of them provide servers, and what I needed was a way to bring all these servers / brokers together into a single location to where the Home Assistant could read them all. So what I had to do is pull information from the inverter into Solar Assistant, pull the information out of Solar Assistant into the MQTT, take that and feed that into Home Assistant, take the Venus OS system and feed that into an MQ server, and take that and feed that into Home Assistant, and then Home Assistant also connects to switches and light switches and automation devices and Shelly devices and all kinds of different little connectors and stuff. And you can go into the device list in a Home Assistant, and if I look under the devices and service, you'll see here there's all kinds of different connections to radios, to power supplies, to like Shelly devices here where I have the light switches and wall fans, and some of these are just meters to determine how much power there is. Some of these are actually on-off switches that you can control. Some of these are 120 volt switches, like it would be to turn off a lamp in the, if you look at the switches over here for the shed light, turning it off or on as I just turned it on and I just turned it off, that would be a 120 volt light switch that it just basically is flipping for me. Whereas if you look at the bedroom fan switch, at night when we go to sleep, we always have a fan on. Well, the fan is just plugged into a wall switch, and I can automatically turn it on here, and then it can automatically be shut off in the morning so that I don't have to worry about going and hunting down how to get that thing turned on. There's also lamps in the living room and stuff that come on automatically. The outside lights on my porch, they come on at 5 minutes till sunset, and they get shut off at 11 o'clock at night every night. That way, regardless if I'm there or not, when I come home, there's always a porch light on and it's never turned off. But all of these devices are all brought together with Home Assistant through either directly connecting to the devices or connecting through an MQTT server. Now, it doesn't end there, because a majority of the devices, clicked on the wrong button there. A majority of the devices you might have are some Shelly devices, but there's also the MQTT servers that we got. There's also HubSpace, which are these devices are basically the little light switch plates that you get at Home Depot. There's also radios and thermostats. The Tulia is my air conditioners. There's all kinds of Zigbee devices to control things like the refrigerator and the RV door, sensors to where if I leave the refrigerator on, funny thing is the refrigerator has a little tone that goes teet, 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 or at least I'm told it does. It's out of my audible zone. I don't hear it. So I actually had to install a kitchen Zigbee sensor on the door that would tell me when the door is left open, and it actually a message pops up on my phone to tell me that I've left it open. But it's also good to know when you're not in the house and stuff like that. I can look at the door and I can say, okay, when was the last time someone went in or out of the door? So I can go over to this now and just say, okay, look, the door was closed 2 hours ago, but it hasn't been open since then. So this was about the time I left to come here for broadcasting today. So basically what this tells me is that my wife hasn't left the house. But these type of things are what you can trigger on, and you can build in your automation around what is going on in your inverter, what is going on in your home automation with your lights and your hot water heaters and so on and so forth. And then what is also going on with your, you can turn on switches and hubs and all kinds of things. So this is why I use all these different devices. It isn't the easiest way to configure things. If you're looking for a very simple configuration, then you probably want to go with the Solar Assistant. It's very simple. Click, point, click, set it up, walk away, forget about it. It's there for statistics. You can set up remote access if you want it very easy. You pay the $40 a year and you're set and done. You can even pay them, I think, off of their website. I think what we saw was you can even buy a completely and totally built system for $169 where you do nothing but plug a wire into it and turn it on, and you're basically finished. They're very simple to do, and that was exactly what mine was. That was before I knew really what I was doing and how I was going to do it. But got off track a little bit, but I think I covered a large portion of this. So the real world case for this is for those of us that are off grid, that are monitoring every bit of power. Think of it as you're on a farm and you have to pump well water up into a storage tank. The last thing you want to do is have to do that at 3 in the morning when your batteries are low. So what you would want to do in a case like that is program Home Assistant to turn that well pump on at 3 in the afternoon when your batteries are full and the extra energy is going nowhere. And this allows you to pump your tanks up. If you have a sensor on the tanks, you can say when the tanks get full or when they get close to full to shut off and to no longer pump it. I've heard people turning on heaters for their pools in their backyard. If you've got a bunch of solar panels on your house and instead of letting that energy just go nowhere, or if you're not set up to feed back to the grid, then you can turn on a heat pump for your pool and that excess energy gets burned off that way. So there are tons of ways to use energy that is a smarter way when you have the tools that you need to make that happen. And that's what Home Assistant, Solar Assistant, the Venus OS system with Victron devices all combined together give me access to do is, and this is actually just in an RV. In a home, there's so much more that I would automate. There's so much more that you could take care of. For example, in a home, a lot of the times you're paying premium for electricity during prime time hours. That means between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m., your electricity is 5 times more than it is any other time. What would be easy to configure something to say, at 5 o'clock, you shut off the hot water heater. You simply don't run. the hot water is still in the tank. It's going to be there until 9 o'clock. It's not like it's going away. But you don't want that hot water heater running excessively during that time frame when the electricity is costing you $3 a kilowatt hour as opposed to 15 or 30 cents a kilowatt hour. So things like that are where Home Assistant and Solar Assistant are extremely useful. And that is what this week is all about. Now, the configuration piece of this is where things get extremely complicated. The MQTT is not for the faint of heart. You're having to basically take a configuration of a communication messaging service and merge multiple messaging services into a single service. Now, fortunately, Home Assistant does provide for a way to do so under one of their configurations. And I will post a link down below to another video from where I learned how to configure them. If you want to learn to configure them, that you can do that. It is not a faint of heart process. There has been several people that have talked to me and we've walked through step by step how to do this. I do not have a video on specifically how to do this, but I do have a source location of where I have done it. And so the key here is why would you want to combine them? The Solar Assistant allows you easy access to get to the data off your solar system, get information out of your inverter, get information out of your batteries, get information in a combined system out and extract it. The Home Assistant allows you to link into local devices, control devices, light switches, wall plates, power switches, relays, turn things on, turn things off, and control things based on that data you get from the solar system. So you're needing to use both of these systems to get to it. The Venus system is nothing more than a private local application for a specific piece of hardware that links into it. It needs to be managed separately because of the complexity around the way they operate, the way Victron operates and stuff. It isn't as globally connectable as some of the others. They are changing, and the fact that they released the Venus OS system itself shows that they are changing and making things better. But the purpose behind all that is to really give you the control over all of these platforms from one place. And that's what Home Assistant is really doing. It's giving you the control of all of this equipment. Now, one of the key questions that I get is this bi-directional? And I do have some questions that we'll go over here in a few minutes, but I want to handle this one before we get there. Is it bi-directional, and can I control things from some of these? And the answer is yes and no. I can control things like light switches and wall plates and stuff like that. I can also control that from within Solar Assistant is allowed to control by changing those configurations. In other words, I can change the charge rate of AC power, whether it's 60 amps or 40 amps or 20 amps. That is a configurable item within Solar Assistant. Therefore, I can make it a configurable item in Home Assistant. I can't add on items that aren't already there. And in some cases, like Victron and stuff, a lot of that information is purely read-only. And so the Victron OS is not really have the configurability that I would get from the Solar Assistant. Now, you ask what some of those items are in Solar Assistant. And if we go into the big one here is under these configurations, if I go into right here under settings, you will see that I have some inverter controls that I have control over. I can set the absorption rate, the float charge, the maximum charge, the grid charge. I can set whether if it's going to be charging based on time, which is the time that we configured on the other screen, or whether it's going to be doing it based on state of charge, or any other configuration that they want to set. So you can configure these things, and you can just edit this and say, okay, I want this based on state of charge, and I want to, instead of it going off at 45%, I want it to go off at 50%. So it'll come on at 16 and shut off at 50. So you can easily configure some of those, and then that is relayed back to the MQTT server, and then that's read from the Home Assistant, this is the Home Assistant, and Solar Assistant, I'm sorry. And the Solar Assistant then gives that back to the inverter, and the inverter makes that change. Not a lot different from using the EG4 app itself to go in and change it, and it relays it back to the inverter, and the inverter makes the change. So yes, you can, but there's limited amount of items that you can go in and make those changes to. It isn't unlimited, it isn't configurable, there isn't no amount of configuration that really is going to change that. It's whatever was originally programmed in to both the inverter and the Solar Assistant, and not necessarily are they all the same. It has to be compatible with all of the items all the way through the chain of command and then all the way back also. In some of the screens, you can see a list of all the items that are available. And if I go over here to Home Assistant under, I think I have a test page here that just lists all my fields. Let me see if I can find it. Don't use it very often. Maybe it's this one here. Yeah, so this has all the different fields that are available for everything. And you can see here, my DIY battery, it also has a couple of, whether the balancing is turned on, whether the charge is turned on, whether the discharge is turned on. Those are configurable off and on, whether I can change them and tune them. So every device depends on if the bidirectional communication is allowed to happen. And then I go down a little. Over here is the lux power. So you can see here I've got the voltage and how it's charging, how it's discharging, what those time slots are, what is the starting capacity, ending capacity. And these are basically the same fields that we saw over here on this device under the configuration, and under the Solar Assistant under this configuration, as you will see over here under Home Assistant. And that's because if the inverter makes it available, then the Home Assistant does, or Solar Assistant does its best to make it available, and then Home Assistant has the ability to make it configurable also. But each one of them has to support it in order for it to make it all the way up and down that chain of command. So you can see here, there are quite a few fields, and to be honest with you, this list has grown considerably over the last 6 or 12 months. I think when I first hooked up Home Assistant, I only had about 3 or 4 of these fields where I could actually do it, which was the charge voltage and when it started and when it ended, and that was about it. So you can see now they've opened it up to pretty much all of them. And so this kind of gives you an idea of all the different fields that are available and all the different things that I can get to, and some level of details that I can see with the amount of power coming in through leg 1 and leg 2, and what the CT clamps are seeing and everything. So you can get to all of these devices. But the whole point of this is Home Assistant is that central repository that brings in all the content from all of these devices and gives you the control to script around it and say, if this happens, I want to do this. Or if that happens, I want to do this. And if this happens and that's happening at the same time, then I want to do this. It allows those complex controls of what's going on and allows you to do it.